And our first speaker and our first topic will be on food waste. I would like to welcome the first fire presentation of the day, uh, named Food Waste and Climate Change by Heidi Spurrell, the CEO of Food Made Good Hong Kong. I'll tell you a few things about Heidi. In November 2019, Heidi led the launch of Food Made Good Hong Kong, a chapter of the UK Sustainable Restaurant Association. She will be heightening the sustainability agenda for the food service sector and extending the Sustainable Restaurant Association influence outside of the UK, reaching not only traditional restaurants, but also workplaces, landlords, schools, and university caterers amongst its membership. FMG is a food sustainability consultancy with a membership program to support its members for the long haul. Now, I'd like to welcome Heidi to present a fire presentation for the next 15 minutes on food waste and climate change.
Hi, Lucia. Thank you. Can you hear and see me?
Yes, fantastic. Thank you. The floor is yours, Heidi.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Well, I want to thank you first, Lucia, for giving us the opportunity to speak about food waste and climate change this morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Heidi Spurrell, CEO and founder of Food Made Good Hong Kong. And as I've only got 10 minutes, I'm going to whiz through this next part. Do I have control of the slides? Oh, will you control them for me, Lucia? So just in case you didn't know, we're taking part in this morning session, but also this afternoon at 3 o'clock, we're running a workshop on food print. So do consider coming and joining us for that. Next slide. Lucia already mentioned that we launched last year, and here's a picture of us at the launch party. You might even recognize yourself here because we had a really great response. So just as a reminder, we are very much mission driven. We're here to support and provide guidance for the food service sector and more recently food retail as well, to operate as sustainably as possible so that we can support and scale a much more sustainable food system. Next slide. Our core service is to provide sustainability auditing, and we've been doing this for over 10 years for the likes of the world's 50 best. We're also trusted by the San Pellegrino Young Chef group and many more organizations. So why do we, as a sustainability organization, focus on food? Well, one of the reasons is that we know that it's really a part of the human experience. And from our research, we also understand that chefs and restaurants really have a huge role to play in shaping our food culture. So that's, shaping how we when we eat, how we eat, what we eat, really having a big influence on this. And as countries, the data shows as countries grow richer, they want to eat out more often. And even in Hong Kong in a normal year, people are eating out between 5 to 10 times a week. So really there's a potential there. Next slide. And just to, next slide. And just to really drive home the reasons why we want to focus on food. Food is the single biggest factor in greenhouse gas emissions, in water use, in biodiversity loss, in health, and it's the biggest employer on the planet. And this is from Professor Tim Lang at the Center of Food Policy, who's been studying connecting the dots and making the link between food and climate for the past 30 years. So you can see that you've got your human health issues, you've got your environmental issues, you've got your economic factors there. And also, I think it's important to keep the big picture in mind when we talk about food and climate. We know that a lot of the food system issues are exacerbated by climate change. Of course, biodiversity, we know that 1 million animals and plants are at risk of becoming extinct. And of course, on the human health side, about 800 million people going hungry in the world, and that number is set to more than double with COVID. While on one side of the world, you have about 2 billion going hungry. So if we dig a little deeper, what do we mean by food system challenges? Well, the food system is ground zero for many of these pressing sustainability issues that society is facing, and not only food waste, as you can see in the top left. And just remember, these are the downstream issues. We haven't even talked about upstream yet. So food waste, plastics, everyone's talking about them in the last few years, that thanks to the sort of David Attenborough effect. But there are all of these other factors that play into the climate issues. How do you treat water, for example, in kitchens? What about energy use? Litter and packaging. In Hong Kong, we don't have compulsory recycling. So plenty of issues to be thinking about in the system. And so what we do at Food Made Good, you can see that there are 10 circles on the top right. They're all fitting into 3 pillars: society, sourcing, and society. And food waste is the very last circle on the right-hand side. It's really at the end of the chain, but it's only one of 10 major issues when we talk about the food system. And all of these circles that we focus on are fully aligned with the SDGs, just to give you the idea of how holistic, managing food and the food system needs to be. So before we focus too much on food waste and climate itself, I really think we need to acknowledge that we're really talking about food and climate. So food, you probably have heard this stat before, is responsible for about 30% of total greenhouse gas emissions, and about half of that is coming from the livestock sector. So really, to put that into context, we're talking about, that's bigger than the global emissions from transport. And then if we focus on food waste and climate itself, about 1/3 of food is lost or wasted during global production and consumption, and lost mostly in low-income countries, but wasted in sort of the richer countries. And I really want to, I don't want to gloss over this. Food waste is it's a travesty. One of the reasons why it has such a devastating impact on climate is that food often ends up in the landfill, where it just decomposes and creates methane. And according to the UN, methane is about 80 times more potent than greenhouse gas emissions in terms of the warming of the earth. So you can see that something has to be done. If we're going to talk about climate change, we have to talk about food. And that's one of the things that I feel in Hong Kong is really missing, because quite often climate is associated with energy bills, AC conditions, but we have to talk about food. So let me just help you visualize. Sorry, can you go back to the last slide? Let me help you visualize when you waste food and it goes to landfill. Before that, somebody will have had to cook it. So imagine the water and the energy use of the human manpower. Before that, it would have been transported to you, probably wrapped in plastic to protect it. Before that, it was probably in a processing facility where it had to be stored and cooled. Think about the energy use in that. And then before that, it will have been probably on the farm with inputs. So again, embedded water, probably pesticides, synthetic fertilizers, human labor. So you're not just talking about the food going into landfill. There's a whole chain of impacts along the way. And then, of course, if there is any meat involved in that food waste, you can double up on your impacts there. Okay, let's go into Hong Kong, look more closer to home, what's happening here. Again, you're probably very familiar with these stats, so I won't talk about them too much, but the target is to reduce food waste to landfill by about 40% by 2022 from its 2014 baseline. 1/3 of that roughly is coming from your industry in hospitality, and 2/3 from home. And this is new to me with the wet markets. Wet markets waste about 14 tons a day. Okay, I'm told to move on very quickly. So these charts really show actually that things are not improving. When you look at 2007 to 2017, the food waste from the commercial sector has increased by about 10%. So we really have to get moving and think about things more urgently. Next slide. So what do we mean by wasting no food? That sort of 10th little circle at the end of our framework. 3 things to remember: monitor, manage, and innovate. So why do we talk about monitoring? If you don't monitor, you can't hold people to account. You can't hold businesses to account. So we need to be holding businesses to account and finding ways to measure and find metrics so that we can know where we are today, so baseline, and then find out where we want to be tomorrow and set some targets. This next slide is really how we kind of illustrate what we mean, how we manage our waste. So you can see disposal is right at the bottom, and the idea of using digestion and composting, in this recycling sector in the middle, that's only looks good when you compare it to disposal. So you really need to be focusing on the green, on the prevention, always prevent. And you can apply this really to plastics and other kind of single-use items. So I think this is a really good way for us to remember when we're trying to communicate what we should be looking for in terms of managing waste. So I just wanted to show you a solution these principles are always the same, no matter if you use one of our solutions or anyone else. You need to be measuring and recording everything, because then you can start benchmarking, you compare yourself to businesses like you. So carrying out a food waste audit is what we always advise, and we do have a bilingual version of this called Food Waste Bad Taste. And that's really about sorting your waste into prep, into spoilage, and into plate waste. Of course, set your targets, as I mentioned. It's all about accountability. And then, as we'll hear from our panelists in a moment, actually, we've got some really great stories about how they're dealing with food waste. And of course, we'll hear how, you really need that buy-in. Staff responsibility is so important, training them up, incentivizing staff to really be there for the long haul, give them reasons, and explaining the why. Why are we doing this? So that you're not just kind of giving orders top down. And then I wanted to share this because this is one of the great toolkits that we provide. One of the ways we support the industry is to provide really easy to use toolkits. So you take research, take data, we compress it into a 2 or 3 pager, and something that everybody in the industry can use fairly easy. It doesn't take a lot of time to understand. And this is a decision tree that we designed, just showing what can you do with edible food surplus. Of course, this is Hong Kong based, so if you're not in Hong Kong, you won't be able to use this. And it's been adapted from something that we used in the UK and localized. What should I do with my edible food surplus in Hong Kong? And this is available bilingually. So do get in touch if it's something you think you can benefit from using. It's a free, this one is a free toolkit. So with food waste, we're talking about edible and inedible. So this one is for inedible and then, edible, and then we do have solutions for inedible food as well. And so if you go on to the next slide. So this is a picture of us at an upcycling facility for food. You can see there are mountains of bread there, and actually it was edible, but it was sent to this facility to get upcycled, turned into animal feed or compost. So the issues are there. We just need to think about better processes and solutions for dealing with food. And then next slide. Just want to say that we're here, please get in touch. This is what we managed to do in a year. We brought on quite a few members from the high street to the Michelin stars, private clubs, universities, landlords. Please get in touch and find out how we can help you deal with not just your food waste, but all of the other pressing issues that relate to sustainability. So with that, I want to say, if there's only 2 things that you remember from this presentation, first one is put in a food waste management system, an effective one that allows for monitoring. And the second one is please reduce your animal protein consumption. So with that, I'll hand over to back to Lucia.
Thank thank you, Heidi, for a fantastic overview of what you're doing at Food Made Good in Hong Kong. And I'd like to now welcome some of the questions from the audience. If there are any immediate questions for Heidi, we can take about 2-3 questions from the audience now. Please use the chat function as we indicated, and later, after a few questions that we have, we will go into the panel discussion. Before we start, we have one question, whether we can receive your slides later on. It will be possible for us to distribute. Heidi, are you okay with that?
Yes, we do. That's possible to use. There's just a statement at the bottom about the way you use it. So it's just making sure that you have permission directly. So we would like to know who is distributing it, and then it's fine.
Okay, fantastic. So we will share that. And then another one question that we received: what metric units do you use to assess the food waste pathways and compare them?
So of course, we're looking at how much money you can save by managing food waste. So we've been doing a lot of research with a couple of universities. So we have a methodology. So it is about the costs. And then we're working with one of our partners to look at the carbon emissions saved. So you've got your financial taken care of and also your environmental impact.
Great. One more question from the audience. What is the proportion of food waste generated by restaurants versus individual food waste?
So I did mention it on the slide. I probably talked too fast over it. It's about a third currently from the commercial sector, which includes restaurants, and then about 2/3 from homes. And the issue really is that it hasn't improved in the commercial sector, but it has improved in the home sector. So we're talking about, moving faster from the industry. I know it's really tough time right now for the restaurant industry, but there are ways to get around these issues. We can talk about that in more detail.
Right. Seems like that was the last question we had. If there's anything else, we can take one more, and then we will go into the panel discussion. So I would like to ask the other panelists to already start preparing and start sharing their video. One more question here. So let me read it out. Who in a particular hospitality business gets to respond to the questions sent by Food Made Good? Are the responses only provided by the founder, owner, or CEO, or are the employees involved as well? Will the responses be audited by a third party to provide credibility? How does Food Made Good follow up with these hospitality businesses to ensure that they are taking solid actions to work towards the goals they have laid out?
That's a lot of questions in one.
Yeah.
So I think what you're asking is how robust is our audit, right? So absolutely, it's a very good question. And this is something that has been honed over 10 years, right? So we've been working really closely with single issue NGOs, for example, academics, businesses. When I talk about single issue NGOs, I mean, really going into the details. So if it's sustainable fish, we've been working with WWF. If it's about organic food and soil, we talk to the Soil Association, right? So what happens is the system is already in place and it's a point system. So they do their survey, we check the evidence, we call up the suppliers, you can see patterns in the way that the responses come in, whether the evidence is genuine or not. Our London office is also very much involved, especially in our first year of running these audits, so that I can tell you they're absolutely robust in the way they've been designed.